Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Friending the Mirror. This episode is called Here I Am, Disability and Motivational Awareness. And I'm very, very pleased to have with us today Jennifer Beilis. Jennifer Beilis has weathered many storms. She struggles with significant hearing loss as well as depression, anxiety, and Meniere's disease, which causes severe vertigo. While her disabilities are hidden, she uses assistive devices such as hearing aids, a frequency modulation device, or FM, and a cane, which often raises prejudices and unwarranted assumptions from others. None of these challenges have stopped her from pursuing an education. She has an associate's degree in social sciences, a bachelor's degree in psychology, and a master's degree in education and deafness rehabilitation. Her graduate thesis focused on how people with disabilities can indeed achieve higher education and find a useful place in the workforce using adaptive devices. As a professional speaker, she offers her motivational and disability awareness seminars both in person and online. Jenny's memoir, Here I Am, is universally valuable, especially for those seeking hope and encouragement in the face of hearing loss and illness. It is an enriching read for anyone who wishes to increase their awareness of disability rights and issues. You can learn more about Jennifer at her website, www.hereimjennifer.com. That's here, H-E-A-R, imjennifer.com. So, Jennifer, welcome. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me.
So, I have actually read Jennifer's book, and I wanted to start out by asking Jennifer, you mentioned in your book that when you mentioned about growing up and being in school and that you were treated badly by both other students and also teachers. And you said that they tormented you. I mean, for me, the teachers were kind of my protectors. So I was just curious, what did they do that made you feel uncomfortable?
Well, I remember when I was a little girl and we moved from New York to New Jersey, and the teachers and the kids were relentless, and I really couldn't make any friends. I was the only one with hearing loss, and all they wanted to do was make fun, especially the teachers and the staff. And then, we carried all the way through college because the staff really had no training, I felt, in dealing with special needs of any kind. And they would say things to me, for example, like, oh, you'll never go to college, or you have communication problems. They were ridiculous. They should have been encouraging, you can do it, good job. I thought that was pathetic, and that led all the way through college and way other professionals talked to me, and that didn't teach the students when I was a student, whatever level, in high school, college, to be nice, unless they knew how to work with people with disabilities, have a sensitivity.
So, Jennifer, could you explain a little bit about your medical issue, about why? I know that you have hearing loss, but could you explain a little bit about how that came about? And I know that the assistive devices that you wear sometimes call unwanted attention to you, so I just wanted you to expand on that a little bit.
Oh, we don't really know. It could have been from a fever at age 5 is when they first figured out that hearing loss. But because I was so relentlessly teased in like the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, especially in high school, that I stopped wearing hearing aids after the 6th grade all the way to junior year in college, because I first of all, at that time, the hearing loss wasn't as severe more severe as it is today. When I had a major car accident years ago, and that caused Meniere's disease, which caused the hearing to change and go down. It varies with different medical conditions can change hearing loss. For example, I have thyroid and Meniere's, which is vertigo, and that can make the hearing loss vary from day to day, or make changes to make it go down. In every case, it's different. But I found this to be very challenging to go to college and the workforce. There's a lot of different things.
So could you talk a little bit about your challenges going to college and whatnot with your hearing loss and that? And also, I know that you have used assistive devices, and you do use assistive devices. Could you talk a little bit about when what it's like when you do use them, what it's like when you don't use them?
Well, if I don't use the hearing aid, then it's one-on-one in a professional situation. It makes it really embarrassing, and I don't know what the speaker is saying. So when I'm on an interview, for example, I'll use the hearing aids in an FM. And what that does, if you imagine a remote control for your TV, it brings the sound closer to the hearing aid, to the person who's using them, to help avoid fatigue. For example, for a job or a classroom situation, kind of a thing. Let's say I've had problems in job interviews. They look at me, a young woman, and they say, well, why in the world does she have hearing loss to themselves? Why does she have a cane, and why does she have an FM? And then I'm trying so hard. I mean, I was employed as a college teacher for many years, and I'm having a really hard time getting employed because I find there to be a lot of barriers to employment. And my biggest one is steps that I cannot do. And a lot of places and businesses do not have handicap access. And it makes it very difficult for me. They would send me home and tell me, they don't want the liability in some places. So in other words, if I'm there just for the day for that place, it's not worth my time because they don't want to make any accommodations. They don't care, it's not right. I've had issues like I would call in advance for a job interview to ask them if they would have steps, and they would say yes, or no, they would say, and I would get there and it would be humongous steps. Even if I was in good shape, probably couldn't do them. Those kind of steps. So, in other words, some people will make you feel very comfortable in an interview process, but just like you're interviewing them and they're interviewing you, you want to see what they're made of and how in the first 5 minutes of how they're going to treat you. Are they going to look down on you? Are they going to make you feel welcome? I mean, you got to want to feel welcome there also. Not the only person with a disability. I mean, it's all well and good to educate somebody, but the thing is, not everybody wants to do it, and not always will. I've had problems in getting accommodations many, many times. Some teachers absolutely refuse to wear the FM for me in college. I won't say which ones. I had problems back in the day in college. They didn't have closed captioning, or in the schools. So when I was growing up, and the thing is, it was one of my first letters I wrote that why should I travel 200 miles just to get a TV that has captioning? I didn't think that was fair. So a local high school across the street let me go there and watch whatever videos they were. So those are some examples. And I when I was a teacher, I always had the students repeat themselves or educate them to repeat themselves, or the staff, and they were really nice, and I hope that, it continues in the next place of employment.
Very interesting information, especially about job interviews, because I think that's really helpful for a lot of people, anyone who has to do interviews, let alone if they have some sort of disability. Now, speaking of which, I know that you're a huge advocate for people who have special needs, I guess, to go ahead and continue to pursue higher education. So what advice do you have for those people if they want to get an education?
I would give the advice from both sides of view, of being a teacher, of being a past teacher, and for being a student and living with disabilities every day and trying to accomplish something, is try to figure out, first of all, what your goals are, write them out, 5 different goals, and then the steps on how in the world are these goals attainable for me? Can I do it? Can I afford it? Do I know what kind of special needs do I have? What kind of accommodations do I need? Who do I ask? How do I ask? All those things are really scary, but if you really want to have an education and you're capable of obtaining one, I wouldn't let anything stop you, and there shouldn't be any reason, that you can't talk to the teacher privately and say, excuse me, can we have a few minutes and talk about whatever it is that you need. Whether you choose to be classified or not, that is your personal decision. It can't be forced. I mean, when you're a child, it's one thing, but when you're an adult, you have the right to make your own decision when you go to school, to college, and you have to learn to advocate for yourself. So by watching this, it's really important for everyone to know how to do something like that, and it's very, very hard to learn, but once you learn it, then you have the skill, and then the next teacher, and the next teacher, and then the job, then, and then if you do a couple times, then it gets easier with practice.
That's great. So I remember in your book that you talked specifically about things that a student could ask a teacher to do to help them with, so that they would make sure that they understood what they needed to be successful in the class. Could you talk a little bit about some of those things?
Do you mean for me as a teacher, or do you mean for me being a student being successful?
As a student.
Oh, well, as a student, I found it extremely stressful in college to assert myself, because I couldn't reach all the teachers. Some of them I felt were extremely prejudiced against people with disabilities, and I thought they had a lot of nerve to announce my accommodations to the whole class, and that attitude problem followed all the way through for a lot of other classes. I thought it was extremely unprofessional on their part, and people made fun of me even on a college level. I thought that was pathetic. I won't say which school or whatever, but then when I got to college and graduate school, I thought it was easier in some cases, because the program was, some of the people had hearing loss of all different levels, as well as the professors. They could be either deaf or severely hard of hearing, or hearing, so all those things as a student in graduate school. I took the program at NYU, deafness rehab and education major for my master's degree. I took that to learn about me, how to accept the hearing loss, and it was very hard. It was very stressful. I was getting memory problems. I didn't know what was wrong with me. The Meniere's and thyroid, all these things were happening to me, and it made it hard learning the sign language, and commuting on a bus with train or torture with vertigo. But somehow I got through it all, and I tried to be assertive where I could, and I would, ask the professor, can you repeat yourself over and over? I would tape the class. I'm sitting in front, but I had to learn sign language. I didn't know it when I first started the program, really, or the correct way to learn it. And until I did, number one, the deaf students wouldn't accept the hearing or hard of hearing students at all, because the whole different culture when they're doing American Sign Language, capital D, deaf culture, versus somebody who had the hearing all their life, and then boom, they lost it from a different health problem, so they call it late deaf in adult, but they still have a normal, regular voice, but just lost their hearing, for an example. Or you have, like me, a hard of hearing. So you have all different kind, and then you have regular hearing, normal hearing. So you have all different types, And so then I would try to watch the interpreters, but the thing is I had to learn it well enough to be able to learn it and then understand what in the world are they signing. So in the meantime, what I did was I had a voiceover interpreter. They would mouth the word to me, so I'd figure out what in the world. Some of it was a teacher who was extremely hard of hearing, which I thought was deaf, and it was a really hard subject matter, and I couldn't understand her voice. Oh, it was so hard. I couldn't stand it. I wanted to scream. And at the same time, I was having the memory issues, and I didn't know what was wrong with me, and it was really, really hard. And so anyway, so somehow, even I went to school during 9/11, which was very terrifying. We had guns and everything. We trapped on the train for many hours, and buses taking 5 hours. And sometimes by the time I would get there, the whole class would be gone, and I would be in tears. And I'm like, great, I just commuted for 5 hours for nothing. And so anyway, I found in graduate school that they were more willing to make the accommodation. I'm not saying all professors, but most of them, were very happy, and they understood because they lived it every day themselves. Some of the teachers had hearing loss, and some didn't. And so most of the other students, they were either capital D deaf or they were hearing. As far as I know, I was the only hard of hearing one at the time. It was a very difficult program, but I did finish it, and and here I am now.
Well, since my program focuses a lot on appearance-related issues, I know that, to look at you without any of your assistive devices, you just look like a normal person, which is fine. So my question then, I know that you've had problems when you haven't worn your assistive devices, and yet you've also had biases and prejudices when you have worn your assistive devices. So, and I know that for a long time, because you felt uncomfortable, because you'd been teased and whatnot, wearing your hearing aids, that you stopped wearing them. And then, what helped you to decide that it was better to wear them than to not wear them? Or did you?
You mean in a professional setting, or do you mean just at home, or what do you mean?
Well, I just mean like out in public, out wherever you, like if you go out into the world or into a store or into school or job searching, I mean, there's advantages if, like, one of the things that I thought was interesting is that when you wear your assistive devices, at least it gives people an idea that there is something different, that you do have a hearing issue. Whereas if you don't wear them, then no one knows that you have a hearing issue until they start talking to you and realize that you are having trouble understanding them. So I wanted you to talk about wearing your devices versus not wearing your devices. What do you prefer? What are some of the differences in the way that people respond to you?
Oh, that's a really good question. I once had a job and I chose not to wear the hearing aids, and I was doing retail at the time, and the people would look at me like I was stupid and talk and look at me, and I'm like, terrific. I'm like, what's wrong with them? Why are they looking down on me? I mean, I don't understand. And so then I figured it out that I would have to tell the manager just like I had to tell the teachers. It was the same idea, but it was new to me to tell these employers, look, excuse me, but I need to talk to you privately. And some of them would be very understanding, and some would not, as in every job. But I do find over time, once the person who has a disability can somewhat, I'm not saying you have to have total acceptance, because one minute you can be accepting your issue and the next minute frustrated and not accepting. So my thing is, if I had to ever do this all over again and talk to my childhood self at, let's say, age 5 or 10, I probably would have gone about it, differently. I had no support, at the time in my life, and I didn't find any support until, let's say, college or whatever. Started making friends with people with hearing loss. It's very hard to find people who have similar problems. So when I was in the workforce teaching, I always had a button that said to face me, but they would, the students, they would forget, even with hearing aids and an FM. I would have to, remind them over and over to say that I have a hearing loss, or to the other staff members to repeat themselves, or maybe write down something for me if I needed it, But sometimes there could be somebody with a very low voice or an accent or a mustache or whatever, or they would talk very fast under their breath, and other people would go out of their way to repeat themselves 900 times. So I find that at home that, I get along, and if I don't have to wear the hearing aids, I don't, which I like and I don't like. But if I'm out in public, I have no choice that I have to wear the hearing aids, because it helps with balance and hearing all the different sounds in the store or whatever, in the car, and so it makes me feel, like a human being professionally, so there's a lot of issues behind all of it.
One of the things that I speak about when I talk to groups is appropriate interaction. Meaning that how to treat people that have differences. So what would you say, what advice would you give to people who might not know how to interact correctly with someone who has a hearing loss? What specific advice could you give them to help, like when they see someone who has or when they're interacting with somebody who has a hearing loss?
Well, that's a great question. I can answer in several different ways. I remember of HLIA and all the Hearing Loss Association of America. And my husband and I, we had done some different skits, and I also did that in the classroom teaching. One second. And it's very important to make sure you have the person's attention. That's the biggest thing in the world. So if you could just talk and talk and talk, and the person may not even know you're talking, and you just said a whole long thing, and then the other person's like still sitting there. You know, like for example, somebody could be calling me from another room and telling me, "Oh, Jen, time for dinner," and then they're screaming, and I'm like, "Why are you screaming for?" And they're like, "Didn't you know I was calling you?" I'm like, well, first of all, I'm marking papers, or I'm studying, or whatever I'm engrossed in. So the proper thing would be maybe to knock on the door and get somebody's attention, for example, or if you, like, maybe ask the person how you want the attention, like maybe go like this, tap them on the shoulder, you know, that's the first thing. And there should be adequate lighting. That's really important. And don't go like this. If you cover your mouth, then even if you don't have a hearing loss, you don't know what somebody's saying. It's not very polite either. Another thing would be to sit close, you know, and always try to, you know, it's important. Maybe you can have a buddy system. They're sitting in a party, or someone could tell you what's going on, or, you know, if you need that, or the classroom or the workforce. And my advice would be, you know, whether it's hearing loss or something else, to tell the teacher or the employer privately if you choose to. It's up to you. To say, you know, I need such and such accommodations, whatever it might be. For example, I need sitting up close to the teacher, you know, and if you are classified, then you would get certain things like, for example, time and a half on a test in a quiet area if you choose to, you know, all different type of things, you know, more time for papers, you know, all different, using a tape recorder, you know, for example, if somebody who's blind, you know, they would use a cane, and they, let's say, for example, they would come and they would use a tape recorder, and their test would be oral. It wouldn't be on pen and paper, unless they could see somewhat, but it wouldn't really be fair. You know, maybe they would use a CCTV, or different things to blow up the print. There's a lot of different things out there that people could do, but they have to learn. What are the accommodations do they need? What is the situation that you're facing? What is giving you a hard time? And it's important to ask for them nicely. If you march and screaming and yelling in a special needs meeting, you're not going to get anywhere, especially if you're a parent and you're screaming and yelling, "Oh, my kid needs a ramp." Well, I got news for you. If they have a hearing loss, and you know, and they don't have any other disability, if the disability must match the accommodation. It is very important to, and you ask nicely. And if you don't get anywhere, you have to keep advocating over and over. So again, if you ask people by screaming and yelling, you're turning them off, and they're not interested in ever listening to you. So if you went in to special needs and said, can you please help me? I need my child needs to sit up front, you know, and they need a quiet area to take testing because the hearing loss distracts them. You know, it depends on what the thing is. Like if somebody is capital D deaf, their major accommodation, if they use American Sign Language, would be an interpreter. It depends on, so in other words, if you have a hearing loss and there's to give you an interpreter, but you don't use sign language, that is totally inappropriate accommodation to have for that particular student. I mean, the disability must match the accommodation, and it is important to advocate for yourself. It's very important. I've done a lot of advocacy and continue to teach people that.
Yeah, that's actually some really important points about the accommodation obviously needs to fit the disability, and then about advocacy. And I think people do need to speak up for themselves. I think it's really important, because if someone doesn't know they have a need or doesn't interpret, it's not obvious they have a need, then that person needs to advocate for themselves. So also in your book, you had mentioned that you'd done work and instruction on bullying. And so I was going to ask you, what sort of advice do you have for people who feel that they are being bullied?
Somebody who is being bullied? Go on.
Yeah, basically, what advice do you have for someone on how to handle bullying?
Okay, well, I got news for you. First of all, I don't allow any kind of bullying, whatever the level it is, whether you're, you know, at work or school. It's very wrong, and you have to tell the person no, because guess what? That person who's bullying is, you know, they're scared of something, and that's, you know, their way of getting back at somebody, and that's the way. Maybe they learned from their family that it's okay, and they bully other people. Well, guess what? It's not okay to make fun of and belittle. That stuff is all wrong. I don't care if you're the president of the United States, or a top position. You have no right to look down on and be mean, to other people. I don't allow it, and I'm the type of person to say something, but it's very, very hard to do so. You feel small and powerless, but sometimes there's got to be ways that you can reach out and teach the other people, through education, that bullying is wrong.
Right, very good. So I know that you are in the process of looking for a job. I hope you don't mind me saying that. If you, in your dream, what type of work would you like to be doing? I know that you still do speaking and you write, and that's great, but if you had your dream job, what would it be?
My dream job would be advocacy and helping all kinds of people figure out what their goals are and how they need to get there. They could have disabilities or not, and I really enjoy helping people.
That's great. I hope you find something that allows you to do that. Now, my last question is going to be, I like for everyone who's watching the show to have an opportunity to really be able to apply something to their own lives. And so I ask my guests to say, if you had one action item, one thing that someone could do to help their current situation, what advice or what action item, what thing could they go out and do to start making their life, better, happier, that kind of thing?
That's a good question. Is that directed towards our audience now?
Well, basically, from your own experience, if you had advice for someone, let's say now, since you deal with hearing loss, let's just say if you had advice for someone who had hearing loss, something that, and maybe they're not quite sure how to deal with it, kind of like, I mean, you kind of were that way for a while and you've overcome that. So what would be a step that someone could take to start improving things for themselves?
I mean, with hearing loss or any goals?
Either one, whatever's easier for you to answer. Whatever you have a good answer for.
Well, those are all good questions. I'm trying to narrow down what you want. But basically, to have a support network, that's another thing. It's really important to find other people that are similar to the problems that you have. That's very important because you need support. You may not get it from your family ever. You may need it from, we may need counseling to be able to deal with your problems. You may need to role play or tape yourself in order to learn how to be an advocate, or look it up online, or talk to other people, like-minded people who are advocates, and try to learn tips from them. It's not easy to be able to deal with whatever problem you have, but admitting what problems you have is the biggest step, and then after you do that, then you find out what do you need to do to be able to get there and maintain that, whether it's, and you need to have some kind of an outlet, be it writing, speaking, painting, drawing, some kind of exercise. So everybody has different outlets that we enjoy, depending on where we live or what we like. You got to try to always have something fun to do, but you always have to keep your mind going, and your body. You have to give yourself, mental challenges and physical. You can't just sit there no more than 2 hours a day at TV. I mean, you can have one day when you want to rest, but, that's not good to be a couch potato. You got to be up there and get up and moving and keep our brains, endorphins going. Very important.
That was very good. Good answer. Now, I know that we have a couple of people on, so if anybody has any questions for Jennifer, this would be a good time to jump on in and ask. There is a delay on the chat, so I'll wait a few seconds. One thing I do want to say is both Jennifer and I are very open to questions, meaning that any time if you come up with something later on and you want to ask, by all means contact us. contact me if it's a question for me, or I know how to get a hold of Jennifer or find Jennifer at her website, hereiamjennifer.com. And there's contact information. So by all means, reach out to us if you have any questions or things that you just want to know about. Jennifer, meanwhile, do you have any closing statements or final words?
Well, I want to show you what the books look like, first of all. A nice butterfly. Here I am, and it represents metamorphosis, and everybody asks why. Because you're going to change and grow. In other words, it's not just reading a book, it's learning from my different experiences and getting out there and making changes. That you have homework in the book to, do different passages and work on things and better yourself. And I want somebody to walk away and learn something. And when I'm in person, I do motivational disability awareness seminar, and I give a lot of information pamphlets out on magazines for hearing loss, vision loss, MS, ADD, all the main disabilities that are out there, and mental health, of course. Try to help people and gear the seminars. That, and I also am a tutor as well. I'm available online or in person as in my area in Monmouth, Ocean County, New Jersey, for various things. My email is Jenny, JENNY08520 at AOL.com, and again, it's www.hereiamjennifer.com.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing the books, and thanks for sharing the information about your tutoring, because I know that that's really important, not just to you, but to the people that you help. So that's fantastic. I have just really enjoyed having you on, Jennifer. For those who don't know, this is actually our third attempt to do this webinar, so I'm really excited that it finally worked. So I've not seen any questions coming up, so I'm going to go ahead and close the show, and I just want to say a couple of things. First of all, the next webinar is actually coming up real soon. It's on February 17th at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, with Andrea Dalzell, who is the current Miss Wheelchair New York. And the name of that episode is going to be Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Access. So I'm really excited to be talking to Andrea in a few days, actually. So as usual, I want to remind everyone, be especially kind to other people, and most importantly, be kind to yourself. And thank you very much for joining me. Thank you, Jennifer. And let's try my little closing here.
Thank you very much, Dawn, for having me on your show.
And my PowerPoint is not coming up as an option. How nice. I do not know why it's doing that. Oh well, so I think what I'll do is I'll just say goodbye, close the show, and say thank you very much for coming, and hopefully you'll join us again at the next episode.